Hey everyone, welcome back. This is probably the most boring Incarnon week we've had so far. By boring, I mean a lack of genuinely interesting Incarnons with usable perks. Also, the Burston Incarnon is terribly bugged. There's a couple things that we'll be telling you in this video. I spoke with Nightmare about it, which you've probably seen in his video or the pinned comments, but do keep this in mind. Instead, we have a few safe picks and some slightly more questionable ones. Nothing really Latron, Strun, Torrid, or a Miter tier, but a decent roster of solid weapons, and then the Soma. That I will address in a future video. The safe pick of the week is Burston, a hitscan primary Laetum that does less damage but still manages to destroy steel paths with ease. As always, these weapons are the second generation of Incarnons shipped with the Duviri Paradox update. The only way to get them is from Steel Path Circuit mode. After clearing the quest and having Steel Path unlocked, you need to pick two of the weapons on rotation to work towards on the Steel Path Circuit mode. Clearing rounds gives points to point tiers. Reach the appropriate point tier, return to the screen to claim your loot. The Incarnon Genesis adapters have a rotating 6-week schedule with the full details in this video's description. If you do not get the adapter for your weapon before weekly reset, it will not reappear for 6 weeks. If you get the adapter, you can use it on your appropriate weapon and Cavallero in the Chrysalith whenever you want. Keep in mind, attaching the adapter requires Duviri open world materials and has unlock requirements on the Incarnon tree perks, just like the original Incarnon weapons from the Angels update as well. Its gimmick? This weapon doesn't really have a gimmick. The Incarnon mode turns into a full auto hit scan weapon that produces a small 2-meter AoE at point of impact. This 2-meter AoE has 100% fall off, meaning it loses 100% of its damage at 2 meters. Yeah, so the AoE is basically only good for crowd controlling status effects, and really won't kill anything unless using grouping setups. Incarnon gains 10% higher crit chance at 3 times crit multiplier instead of 1.8, massively boosting the damage output. Base damage only goes up a little bit, but importantly, becomes pure heat and is split 50% between direct hit and AoE. This is actually bad, since AoE ignores GunCO, and the AoE size and falloff make it nearly non-existent on this weapon. The other gimmick is probably that half the Incarnon perks don't even work properly. This is for better or for worse, as some of the good stuff is bugged in a good way. But for GunCO, it is additive on this weapon and once again, ignores innate damage buff perks from the Incarnon tree. This makes it much weaker than you'd expect and also ignores the AoE part of the Incarnon mode, which sadly makes up 50% of the original DPS. Also, one last bug. This weapon seems to have abnormal hitbox registration or invisible unintended ricochets. You will occasionally see damage numbers on the edge of screen and hitting stuff you can't even see. So how about the Incarnon perks? This is probably the easiest explanation I've ever had, since a good chunk of the perks are either completely useless, bugged to not work, or bugged to always be working and thus better than alternatives. Perk 1 is the same as all other Incarnon guns, except Torrid. You shoot hence the build Incarnon meter nullifier to activate it. You can even activate without full meter and it will grant % ammo equivalent to how much of the bar is filled. Incarnon mode somehow holds 600 shots when the Soma Incarnon only holds 200, and is unaffected by magazine or ammo max perks or mods. Remember that you can keep shooting the head hitbox of an enemy immediately after they die before they fall, and it will still count as headshots to build the Incarnon meter. Perk 2 only has 2 choices. First of all, these increased innate damage traits are ignored by GunCO in this weapon, so they give a lot less than you'd expect. The left side perk gives +5 multi-shot on the final magazine burst. Not only are there 9 bursts to fire per mag, but the Incarnon mode is full auto and completely ignores this multi-shot bonus. The Incarnon mode is also where all the damage is on Burston. You do not want to DPS with a normal mode, ever. Because the left perk does nothing for Incarnon mode, you will always pick Fortress Salvo. It's also super easy to hit 450 armor in the future if needed. Perk 3 is also very simple. It only takes 2 to 3 bursts per Burston to max its Incarnon meter bar. There are 9 bursts per magazine, and exiting Incarnon mode always refills your entire magazine. Therefore, extended volley is useless. Ready Retaliation is supposed to only give plus 100% reload speed when you reload from empty. Currently, it is bugged to always give you plus 100% reload speed no matter what. So obviously, you pick this since it cuts the normal reload to 1 second, but also affects the Incarnon transformation and makes it occur twice as fast. In the future, if this gets patched, you pick Kinetic Battle for minus 50% recoil. The thing is, normal mode already removes almost all recoil with just primary deadhead or stabilizer, and this isn't needed. Incarnon mode has almost 0 recoil to start with as well. Perk 4 is also an easy one. Fatal Affliction has been tested to work like GunCO. This means not only does it ignore the AoE part of Burston Incarnon mode, nor just that it also pales in comparison to a real GunCO, offering 80% damage per status, but it also ignores the increased damage by plus 42 from the second perk tree. The worst part about this is that this perk adds 42 damage to the direct hit AoE of the Incarnon mode. This means the original base damage and AoE of the Incarnon mode are actually only 13 damage each. This is the value of GunCO and this perk will scale off of. Not only does this mean this perk is garbage, but for the first time in a long time, you will never use GunCO on this weapon. You know how GunCO is supposed to give plus 80% base damage per status on a direct hit? On this weapon, it by equivalent only gives plus 23.6% base damage per status on Burston. You would need 7 status effects for the direct hit to pass Serration. Keep in mind this also completely ignores Burston's AoE, making it still worse. A full 13 status effect encumber setup would be required for GunCO Burston to match just using Serration instead. The status chance tips it past Serration for dot damage, but the only time a 13 status secondary encumber heat inherit DPS comes into play is against Demolists, and yet you could skip the encumber primer, prime only viral, and use Serration to not worry about GunCO stacks, and at worst, only kill the Demolist roughly 1.5 times slower due to lower status chance. For the left side perk, Reaver's Rapture caps at 5 stacks. It also gives base damage. This means at most it gives plus 100% base damage. Not that useful because we already have Weapon Arcanes granting plus 360% base damage, and the middle perk Absolute Valor increases our innate crit chance by 22%, from 18 to 40% on non-Incarnon and 28 to 50% on Incarnon mode. This is vastly superior to just a bonus plus 100% base damage. This also means that you never have to change your Incarnon perks around on Burston. Well, unless the reload perk gets patched, then you just swap to minus 50% recoil forever. For all builds today, you don't need any source of fire rate at all on the weapon outside of the Demolyst killing build. For normal play, Burston Incarnon, despite all its bugs and perks, still destroys everything and has a base 20 fire rate. This means you don't need to mod any on the weapon, but if you still want to, I would advise bringing a fire rate arcane or a fire rate warframe buff. But it really isn't needed for trash fodder clearing. Burston is innate heat and hitscan with a tiny AoE and 100% fall off on the Incarnon, so there aren't that many ways to use it. I will not be showing you gas builds today because it is very underwhelming on this weapon due to lack of GunCO scaling. Just low innate damage in general even if GunCO did work, and a near non-existent AoE that cannot compare to dual Toxicist punch through ricochet tech. Build 1 is your basic corrosive build. The weapon already has heat built in to strip armor further, so we don't need to mod it. This is the only easy red crit build I have today. Use Amalgam Serration if you can fit it. I struggled with Forma to fit all 4 builds on. Also, use a rank 5 Stormbringer instead. Burston Incarnon has base 50% crit chance with our Incarnon tree, so critical delay slaps a fat 100% final on top of that. Galvanized Scope gives another 160%, which is easy to get on headshots due to lack of recoil, bumping the 150 to 310% for guaranteed rents. Perfect way to take advantage of deadheads plus 30% headshot damage and minus 50 recoil. Prime Bane only applies once here, but it's still a plus 55% final damage, and get this, the weapon has barely any zoom, so Galvanized Scope is easy to use. Build 2 is Cookie Cutter Viral Hunter Munitions. The only things that have changed are dropping the 2 Corrosive mods for Prime Cryo rounds and Malignant Force to make viral. Prime Cryo to give us higher raw damage, to kill fodder without relying on slash procs, whereas Malignant Force gives more status to proc viral more easily. Hunter Munitions replaces Galvanized Scope this time for juicy slash procs bypassing armor scaling, and this time we take Merciless because you probably aren't going to be reliably getting headshots, but if you really want to try and focus on shooting fodder heads before slash procs kill them to maintain deadhead, then be my guest. Build 3 is a standard viral heat build. You probably noticed by now we're only swapping 3 mods. Is that what I meant about not much build diversity on Burston Prime? Amalgam Serration is still used like all other builds because GunCO sucks on this weapon. We spent 3 slots for Elemental's viral heat since it pumps up our status super high, while also keeping main heat weight. Running rank 0 viral mods are not viable here like Slash melees, because unlike Slash, heat mods do boost the damage of their own dots, and we need enough viral and status weight for it to apply as well. Merciless again because, well, you're killing enemies with heat dots. If you trust your trusty aim, then feel free to mess around with Deadhead against trash fodder. Now this one is the gas build I said I wasn't gonna show you. I don't recommend this because this weapon sucks at AoE and has bad base damage with high fire rate. It caps out 10 gas stacks way too quickly and has no good way to spread it in a crowd. It also cannot benefit properly from GunCO, whereas typical good gas builds can take advantage of GunCO properly. Yes, deadhead because gas can headshot somewhat often on dots, but this build needs all the help it can get. And make sure you always scope for bladed rounds. Again, I do not advise using this build. Yes, it kills, but literally every single other build in this video kills faster. The last build is a Heat Inherent DPS build to kill Demolists. If you ignore the GunCO problem this weapon has and all the extra hoops you have to jump through to make an Encumber GunCO Burston Incarnon work, you can skip all of that and the maintenance and just kill about 1.5 times slower on a basic Serration build that only cares about viral procs and needs and nothing else. Since we source our heat percent from our primer, and the weapon is pure heat in Incarnon mode, we don't need to mod any heat mods. We only have GunCO here for the actual plus 80% status for faster heat procs to burn Demolists to death. Yes, the tiny base damage, even though it sucks on this weapon, is better than the extra 10% we would have gotten from Rifle Aptitude. This build has to bring fire rate arcanes on your Warframe to work properly. Arcane Acceleration. Remember to bring Primed Bane because it double dips for 2.4 times more heat damage. Heat Inherent uses the heat percent of the weapon that applied the first stack, and when double dipping Banes uses 1 Bane from the primer and 1 from the DPS weapon. Therefore, whatever Heat Inherent primer weapon you use, make sure it has as high elemental heat percent from mons as possible, and also equips the matching Primed Bane. That's it. Shoot this primer before you shoot your Burston Incarnon. Armor strip helps. Cheers. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with the Duviri update. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis, as you don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.